Welcome back. This is X1T Gaming, and together we're going to revolutionize the gaming industry. So we're coming back to be on part two, or no, part three. So had a good lunch. Hopefully you guys had a good lunch too. And yeah, this is what we have. I'm just keeping these ones here for now so that there's no overrides. If we need to edit stuff, we'll just edit it here, and then we'll just do the override thing like they said. And then by the time everything is done, we'll just delete those things because we want to see them keep on moving. So we got this working. It's all random, which is pretty nice. We got this one working, which is pretty nice. And so what we're going to be working on for the next couple steps is I think we're going to be changing. Let me just see. So we're in 2.4, and is it? I think 2.4 is the last one. Oh, challenge plate, challenge 2. Yeah, so this might be the last one for our game, and then we'll get all done and complete. So we're going to make a new method to spawn animals. So I think that's going to be the timing. Spawn the animals at timed intervals. Okay, so we're going to probably do it automatically. Then we're going to have it so it's timed, so it's not just going crazy overload. And then add colliders and trigger components, probably for the food to you feed the dogs, they're happy. Destroy objects on collision. Trigger a game over message. Then do let's recap. So I think that's going to be the end of this one. We might have one more challenge after that. Okay, so video 1, make a new method to spawn animals.
Alright, so our project is looking really good right now, so we can actually create a whole bunch of different animals by pressing S. But if we want to do that now, what we're going to do is we're going to type in void. Now, void tells the computer that this function or method does not return anything. So it just does what we tell it to do inside of this block of code, very similar to what the update function is doing in this block of code. So it's just going to do something that we need it to do. Now, when we're creating our own custom functions, we should name it in a way that it tells us the task that it's doing. So in this case, we're actually going to create a custom function that tells us to spawn a random animal. And then to close it off, very similar to our update or start functions, we'll just use parentheses. And then if we press enter and use the curly braces, now we can add whatever blocks of code that we need inside of this spawn random animal function that we've created. In fact, we've already written code that will allow us to spawn a random animal. You can see inside of our if statement that we already wrote all of the code that we need to spawn a random animal. So what we can actually do is just take out this entire 4 lines of code and just put it into our spawn random animal method. So if we highlight all of those lines, and then we control or command X to cut it, and then in our spawn random animal function, we can just paste that in there. And now every time we call the spawn random animal function, it will automatically go through these 3 lines of code to be able to create a new animal at the end of it. If we go into our if statement, we can now just type in and now every time we press S, our update function will call spawn random animal. Spawn random animal will then go through this line of code to create a random animal index, and then it will get a random position to place that animal at, and then it will call the instantiate method to be able to actually create that animal. By creating your own custom functions and methods, it makes your code a lot easier to read and manage by making sure that certain tasks that you need only for a specific purpose are kept inside of one specific method, And then you can just reuse that method over and over whenever we want to spawn an animal for any use later. So just to make sure that
Okay, so pretty much what I said before was like having these private floats. Why you want to have these longer stuff is because it's easier to manage and change the stuff. So just like this is going to be easier to manage because we already have the whole code that works. So we'll just save to make sure that I did this right. Did I save it? Boom, save. I pressed the wrong button. Okay, so nothing should change with this one. Okay, so yeah, these are just different things to like it make code easier to read, make code easier to deal with. Now we want to spawn animals at timed intervals.
Great, so we've added our new custom function to our spawn manager. So when I play the game, the animals still spawn randomly, which is great. Now, what we need to be able to do is spawn the animals on a timer, so that way we don't have to press S anymore. Now, we're going to use a new method this time called invoke repeating, and we'll actually put it inside of our start method. And so, what invoke repeating does is it will actually take a method that we want to call, and at a certain time, we'll start to call that method, and then we'll constantly repeat it over time, depending on whatever rate we want to use. So in our case, we can actually just use strings, so we'll call the string, and it'll just be the name
right now, buddy.
of the method we're using. So spawn random animal. Now we need to give it a time to start at, so we'll just say 2 for now. And then we actually need the time that it will repeat every single time. So we'll just say 1.5 seconds that it'll repeat. So the way that we read this method is that we'll repeatedly call our spawn random animal method starting at 2 seconds, and then we'll call it again and actually just get rid of this input that we have by pressing S to spawn a random animal. Now, if we save and we go back into Unity, when we play our game, let's hope that this works. There you go. You can see that we have started spawning animals, and every 1.5 seconds, we're going to have a different random animal spawning, which is perfect. That's exactly what we wanted to happen. So we'll stop playing for now. Now, one thing that I do want to show really quick is in invoke repeating, if we type spawn random animal and say we accidentally used a lowercase letter, like our lowercase s, and then we save this, and then in Unity, if we tried to do that again, so you can see at the bottom, Unity is actually saying that it's trying to invoke a method that can't be called, because actually that method doesn't exist. So it's always important to make sure that you properly capitalize things whenever you're typing. So now what you're going to do is you're going to use this fancy new method called invoke repeating, and we're going to use that to...
Okay, so yeah, that's it. We did invoke. Oh wait.
Call our spawn random animal method. Make sure it's a string. Float. So back in our spawn manager script, we're going to just fix the S on spawn random animal. And we don't like having just these numbers in our code, so we're going to turn these into variables too, in case we want to change the numbers at some point. So we'll call this private float start delay. That way we know how long to wait until we start spawning animals. And I think 2 is a good number for now. So we'll make another private float, since we know this has decimals. And this will be the interval that our animals spawn. So spawn interval. And I think 1.5 was fine, so we'll keep that for now. And then we'll change the 2 to start delay. And then the 1.5f to spawn interval. And then make sure that you close those statements. So what you're going to do is you're going to create 2 new variables for our start delay and our spawn interval. And then you're going to use this fancy new method called invoke repeating to call our spawn random animal method with our start delay
So it's
and our spawn interval. And then you're going to remove all of the spawn code that we had in our update method.
Alright, so just making it a little bit easier. Now we're going to add colliders.
Okay, so we have it so that our spawn manager is spawning all of these animals and race of food runs into these animals. And we're going to use something that should be a little bit familiar called colliders. So what we're going to do first is we're actually going to double click on one of our animals. And so now you actually see that we're in our prefab preview mode. So we can actually just see our prefab instead of seeing our actual scene. And this is where we can actually make changes. So if we made a change to this prefab and say we had 50 of these dough already on screen, it would automatically apply all of those updates instead of us having to go to the overrides and then apply all in the top right. So what we're going to do is with our animal prefab, we're going to go to add component. And we're going to type in collider. Now you can see we have all of these different collider options. In our case, a box collider is probably good enough for what we need. Just be careful, especially to not select box collider 2D. That's specifically for 2D games, and even though this is top down, we still have 3D objects, so we should be using a normal box collider. Now, the cool thing about using our prefabs preview mode is that we can actually autosave whenever we change things. So we added this collider and it automatically saved our prefab. So that's cool. So we're going to use these perspective views to just get a better angle on our dough over here. So let's give it a side view. We'll just line this up really quick. Now we can edit our box collider in one of 2 ways. We can go and change the values of our size here, either by grabbing the number or just changing the number itself. Or we can use this edit collider button, which is super useful, so that we have this side view. We can get like a general estimate of how large we want this thing to be. So you see these dots on the box now, so we can actually just click and drag these dots. We can get like a pretty good estimation. And then we'll bring the top down a little bit and then scroll this out a bit more. Do that. And let's do like a back view just to see about there and about there. And so if we fly around our dough, you can see it's pretty close, honestly. It's good enough. It's good as it's going to be. So now that's already been saved. One thing that we want to do, uncheck the edit collider button and make sure you click is trigger, because this collider will actually be a trigger for when our piece of food hits one of the animals. Another thing to make sure is maybe you accidentally click on the dough as you're editing. All you have to do is go back to the very top animal at the top of the hierarchy, and it will highlight your animal, and you can see that your box collider is already applied there. So we've added this collider, we can autosave, and we can go back. And now if we actually look at our dough now, we change the preview of the prefab, but it already has a box collider.
Okay, let me just try to edit this before I continue. Okay. Boom. Okay.
A quicker thing that I like to do just to make things faster and I don't have to click into prefabs all the time is as I'm setting up all of these different characters and objects, I just leave them on the screen, and so I can actually edit Arc Collider here if I wanted to. Add a box collider, edit the collider any way that I want to make it smaller, and then I'll override it so then I don't have to keep going in and out, and then it'll just apply it to all the prefabs. And then when I'm done editing all of those different assets, then I can just remove them from the scene, and since they're auto respawning, it makes it really easy.
Okay, let me see that one more time.
Back. And now if we actually look at our dough now, we change the preview of the prefab, but it already has a box collider. A quicker thing that I like to do just to make things faster and I don't have to click into prefabs all the time is as I'm setting up all of these different characters and collider any way that I want to make it smaller, and then I'll override it so then I don't have to keep going in and out, and then it'll just apply it to all the prefabs. And then when I'm done editing all of those different assets, then I can just remove them from the scene, and since they're auto respawning, it makes it really easy. So I'm gonna edit all of these animals really quickly, and then we'll go back in. Cool, so I'm down to my moose.
Okay, so time to go and edit all these animals now. Okay, so we go here. Bring this one in like this. Bring this one in like this. Bring this one in like this. This one in like this. So the X view. Bring this one up. Bring this one down. Bring this one in a little bit more, I think. Okay, let's go towards Z. Bring this one in a little bit more. I think that one is good. Now let's do the overrides. Apply all. Okay, make him the focus. Let's add another box collider. We want to edit the collider. Start on the top position. Work our way in. Almost there. Okay, I think that's good for that one too. Okay, let's just override. Okay. I think that looks good. Okay, so we got all those. Now we can zoom back out. And he says that we don't need those dogs anymore. Or let's just keep them in for now. Okay.
Now I've already set up the collider to be properly sized. Just make sure to click is trigger, and then afterwards, since this is an object on our scene, we're just going to override it so all of the moose prefabs get that collider. So with all of our box colliders applied, and we've applied the triggers to all of them, the reason why we added triggers is to be able to detect when another object collides with this box. So for example, with our food, when the food enters this box collider, the box collider will know that something has entered this space, and then we can actually, using code, have our animals be removed from our game when that happens. The last thing that we're going to do is we're going to go into our pizza. And in this case, I'll actually just go directly into the prefab. And we're going to go and add a box collider in here. Perfect. And then this will be a trigger as well, so that when it collides with something, it knows and it'll be deleted. And then one thing that we do have to do is colliders actually require a rigid body to be able to detect a collision in our physics. So if we type in rigid body, and we'll apply a normal rigid body, not a 2D rigid body. And since we want our piece of food to fly through the air, we're just going to turn off gravity so it doesn't fall through the ground. So now using physics, we'll be able to detect, because of this rigid body, whenever this piece of food enters one of the colliders of one of our animals, and then we'll be able to delete the animal because something entered its collider, as well as we'll be able to delete the piece of food because something also entered its collider. So now what you're going to do is you're going to go onto...
Okay, mark is complete. And objects destroy on collision.
Alright, so on all of our animals, we have added each of these box colliders that have triggers on them. We've done the same thing with the piece of food, as well as added a rigid body to it. Now we're going to create a new script so that we can destroy any of these objects whenever they collide using code. So we're going to go down to our projects window, in our scripts folder, create a new script. And we'll just call this detect collisions. Now we're going to add the detect collisions script to all of our animals and our food. And then just make sure to apply those scripts if you didn't do it on your prefabs. So now that we have all of our detect collision scripts attached to all of our different objects, we're going to open up the script by double-clicking. Now, in our script, what we're actually going to do is, instead of using start or update, we're going to go underneath start and update. And we're going to type in void. But instead of creating our own function, we're actually going to override a function that already exists in the MonoBehavior class. So we know that start and update are both functions from that class, and we can actually use functions from that class to be able to do things that we want it to do. So if we type in capital O, N for on, capital T, R, I, so you can see here that my autocomplete tells me to use on trigger enter. So I'm just going to press enter on that. And so it'll automatically fill my on trigger enter method. You can see when it auto-completed that it already made this method private so that it's only available within this class. And then it also automatically gave us a parameter that we have to fill in whenever it happens. Now, because of the way that this method is set up, it actually is already pulling all of that information in from MonoBehavior. So what happens is, in Unity, whenever one of the colliders collides with one another, it'll actually know from this script that they've collided and it should do something. So in onTriggerEnter, we're going to type in destroy. And we're going to destroy this game object. Something we're very familiar with now. So if we save and then we test, So if we watch this food and this fox over here, you can see that the fox immediately eats the food, which is great. Now in our IDE, when our food collided with the animal, it destroyed itself. And in fact, it also knows that it collided with that other animal. So, in fact, we can destroy other, which in this case will be the animal that it collides with, and then we'll destroy that game object. So now when we test again, when we're in Unity and we play our game, when the food and the animal collide, they're both removed from the game as well. And then we can actually see if these collisions work. Yep, there you go. So it works on the dough. And one more. Cool. So now what you're going to do is you're going to create your own detect collision script. And then you're going to apply that script onto each of the animal prefabs. And then you just want to make sure that they're all attached. And make sure you also add it to the food as well. And then in your detect collision script, you're going to create your own overridden function called onTriggerEnter, which actually comes from the MonoBehavior class. And then in that method, you're going to call the destroy methods to destroy the game object and then destroy the other game object. So that way, when both of these things collide, they're both removed from the game. Now it's your turn.
Oh, okay. I know I forgot to do. There we go.
Can you tell me where to go?
I don't know. It's a puzzle, buddy. You got to figure out yourself.
No, please can you tell me where to go?
I don't know where to go. I haven't played the game yet.
No.
Buddy, I'm filming right now. I can't do this. I'm still streaming. I'm almost done. I got this one video left. Yeah. You want to see what I got so far? Wait, come on. Let's not go your daddy. Okay. So we got one more video to do. And this one's going to be destroy out of bounds .cs if anything is a else if condition that checks if the animal reached the bottom of the screen, add a game over message. Wait.
All right, cool. So we have all of the collision set up in our game, which is awesome. We have this little bounding box problem, but we'll fix that later. Can't actually feed any of those animals.
Oh, careful, that's a microphone.
And the doe, and we got one of the animals, and this fox. Cool. So we have the collision set up properly. Now, one of the problems that we have outside of that invisible wall is that we can't actually end our game if any of the animals get past the player. So we're going to add a small thing to fix that just to show us that the game is over. So one thing that we're going to do for cleanup, since we know that the spawn manager can spawn all these animals now, the player can spawn their own food, and all of the collisions are set up, we can actually just remove all of these different food and animals that we were using just as placeholders while we edited them. So we'll select all of them, right click, and just delete. So in order to tell us that the game is over, we're actually going to go into our destroy out of bounds script. So in our destroy out of bounds script, you can see that we have a destroy object whenever the piece of food goes past the top. And in our else if, we actually have a really nice place where, since the animals get past the player, that's a good place where we can end the game. So the way that we're going to tell ourselves that we can end the game is by using something called debug.log. And in debug.log, we can actually just put in a string.
Maybe I need you to get off. I need to use the computer. Okay, I'll come snuggle you afterwards. Day's almost done. I love you. Okay, so we'll finish this up really quickly. So in here, we want to do the debug.log.
Type in game over. And if we save that, so what debug.log will do is actually in Unity, it will tell us at the bottom where it logs all of the different errors or warnings in Unity. Whenever an animal gets past us on the screen and they get destroyed, it'll tell us game over. So if we just wait for an animal to go by, there goes that moose. And in the bottom left, you can see it pops up game over. So debug.log is a really great way to be able to tell yourself something whenever you want something to happen in Unity. So for example, for collisions, if we wanted to know that a collision happened, we could use debug.log to see if it actually happened in case we needed it to. It's very helpful if you ever need to see if something is happening the way you want it to. As another last bit of cleanup, what we're just going to do is we're going to add in some comments to our code to make it readable. So for example, 2// if an object goes past the player's view in the game. So we're just going to go into the rest of our other scripts now and just make sure that we add comments for wherever it would be helpful to just understand what's happening in all of these different places. Something else that you can do is in places where you see especially messy code, maybe you can write new functions to be able to handle those things. And then if you end up having some really crazy formatting, a really easy way that you can fix that, for example, if I just, let's put that there and we'll just go over here or something, and then we'll put this all the way next to this brace. If you go over to Edit in the top left if you're in Visual Studio, if you go down to Advanced, and then you see this option here called Format Document. If we press this, it'll actually reset all of the weird spacing that we had to make our code a lot more readable. So what you're going to do is you're going to tell yourself that the game is over by using a debug.log.
Right, so that's it for this one. Mark step is complete. I think challenge to play fetch. So I think that that's it. I don't think we're not trying to actually make a video game. He's just showing us how to work. Of course, now we have the integers that we can have to make it better. And now we're going to be doing challenge 2, which is play fetch. Okay, so now we got a challenge now. So yeah, that's it for this stuff. We finished it. Of course, there's stuff to work on because if you want to make it a game, and and we're going to start doing the challenge. See if we could debug the challenge that they have. So I'll download it while I'm off the camera, and then today at 9 Pacific Standard Time we will go through the challenge trying to debug the ball playing fetch. And yeah, so just remember, together we're going to revolutionize the gaming industry just one step at a time. Baby steps. We're figuring this out. It does seem it is a little bit complicated, but I'm starting to get it. And once you start getting it, it gets easier and easier, which is pretty exciting. I feel like I'm like that much closer to getting my actual game completed. Okay, until next time,